Good afternoon, everyone. It is 2 o'clock, so I will go ahead and get us started. I am Taylor Post, Swiftland's Office Manager, and I would like to welcome you all to today's webinar, Sparkle, Life Choices, and today's presenter, Linda Bruno. Linda has been developing and conducting training workshops for libraries and other organizations for more than 15 years. She offers workshops on topics ranging from leadership skills to returning balance and lots of areas in between. Linda received her MBA from the University of Florida and has years of experience in hands-on management positions. She develops her workshops based on solid research and, more importantly, real-life application. Please welcome Linda Bruno and enjoy her webinar this afternoon. Linda?
Thanks so much, Taylor. Welcome everybody to today's session, which I've probably said this to all of you before about different topics, but this one truly is one of my very favorites. And this is actually the first time I've presented it. And one of the reasons I like this kind of a topic is because it's so individual for each one of us. Some of the things that I talk about in my trainings are foundational to how we move through life, and they're sort of other oriented, if you will, but this particular topic is very you centered. And I hope you'll spend the next hour really thinking through what I'm going to talk to you about today. And of course, it's life choices. No secret there, and nothing really alarming about the title compared to what we're going to talk about, but we're going to dig pretty deep. So be prepared for that. And I really do hope that for the next hour you'll engage fully, but not only that, that when you leave today, you'll allow some of this stuff to percolate down inside you so that you really do apply some of the things that we're going to talk about. So I found this quote and it just struck me. It says, but until a person can say deeply and honestly, I am what I am today because of the choices I made yesterday, that person cannot say, I choose otherwise. So that just gives us a lot to think about, doesn't it? I am who I am today because I've made really good choices in some areas of my life and not so good choices in other areas of my life. But I want to point out that those choices were mine. I can't really remember. I might have been encouraged to make some of those choices, but nobody ever held my arm behind my back and forced me. And I need to acknowledge that so that I can move forward looking forward and not really dwelling on the past. As you can see, it says time for change. It's up to you which direction you choose, this way or that way. So let's look at it. What does the word choice even mean? And that sounds silly, doesn't it? We all know what a choice is, but have we ever really thought about it? It's an act of selecting or making a decision when faced with two or more possibilities. We do it every day. We make choices dozens of times a day. Most of those choices are not going to affect us long term, not a big deal, but the act of selecting or making a decision needs to be what we think about as far as our own personal accountability within that choice. So here's something else I want you to think about from Merriam-Webster. I want you to look at the bold words on this slide. The act of choosing, the power of choosing, a person or thing chosen, and I love this last one, care in selecting. This is all for you folks. You make the act of choosing because you have the power to choose and select what you're going to do with whatever's in front of you. Is that not phenomenal that we have those choices? And, a lot of people don't have as many choices as we do. And of course, some of us in this room don't have the same choices as other people in this room. However, we all should recognize we have a lot more choice in front of us than a lot of the population of the entire world. And that's a responsibility in my mind to make good use of those choices. Another thing, there was a response to a search question that said, what does it mean to have choice? And what came back was choice suggests, look at these words. I know I'm getting overly dramatic here, but I love these words. It suggests the opportunity or privilege of choosing freely. I think you understand how important I think this particular topic is. It's an opportunity or a privilege to have those choices, isn't it? So as we go through today, I want you to think about which of those words that we just looked at, and you can choose more than one, resonates with you as we begin this webinar. It might have been the act of selecting, or power, or chosen, or privilege, or opportunity, or freely. Would you go ahead and type that into the chat box? Which word resonates with you, or words? Yeah, opportunity. Freely. That's huge, isn't it? There are some things that are forced on us, or for instance, I'm not going to say forced, but when you go to work every day, there are certain parts of your job that you don't have a choice over. That happens to all of us. I had a program that had to be rescheduled the other day, and I had actually planned on going to visit friends. And my friend was a little bit pushy about the fact that I had had to reschedule, but it wasn't forced on me, but that's what I do. I want to be dependable to people. That's my choice. I could have said to this person, that's not going to work out for me, and they probably wouldn't have thought anything about it. But selecting and privilege, contemplate, absolutely, act freely, privilege, all of the things that you've mentioned here. Yvonne said, Karen, selecting, taking the time to choose wisely, action, power. Look at those words. We could we could wrap up today, couldn't we? If we just kept those words in front of us so that when things come along, we could think about it. Now, this is different. Several names in the chat are familiar to me, and this is going to be a little bit of a different format than we usually use. I sincerely hope that you printed off the handouts that Taylor sent you with the link to join today's session, because it's something that when I went back and refreshed myself before today's session, we were actually going to do this one in March, and it had to be rescheduled, which is no big deal. And so I went back and refreshed myself on my notes because I know how enthused I was when I actually developed the program. And it's helpful for us to do that, isn't it? So if you have your handouts there, you can go back and refresh yourself, because you're not going to apply everything we talk about today, or you're not even going to ponder deeply everything we talk about today. But I'll challenge you to say that most of it's worth pondering. So if you have your handouts available and you make your own personal individualized notes, then a month from now or a year from now, I have a form of this. It's not about life choices, but it's more about how I'm moving through my life. I guess that's life choices. And I just packed this away for, I'm going to be moving in a few months, and I want to make sure I take that with me. So I do hope you have your handouts that you can take with you. So let's take a look at this kind of weird format, if you will. Just a different way of looking at things. We're going to take each letter, as you probably suspected just looking at this slide. We're going to start with the L in life choices. So what might L stand for? Well, first of all, listening to others is important, but also your own intuition. Just say yes if this has ever happened to you. Something came up, you needed to make a decision, or you needed to go in a certain direction. Your intuition told you one thing, but other people told you something else, and you had to decide which way. Karen said her intuition is always wrong. No, it's not. You know what happens sometimes, Karen? We think that's our intuition, but we've absorbed what other people are telling us should be. I used to have a friend, and this is going to sound vulgar on the recording, I'm sure, but she's a psychologist, and she would tell people that were really mired in looking backwards and being woe is me and negative and all those kinds of things. And she'd say, stop shoulding on yourself, SHOULDING. And so sometimes we hear what's going on around us. We hear what's in the news, what's on social media, what our friends and family say. And we think because we've heard that so much that that might be our intuition. And sometimes it is not. Oh, okay, Karen, she says, yes, it is. Deborah said, only it was me who decided to ignore the intuition. What a mistake. Yeah, we've all done it. I know I have. And I look back and think, wow. And then other times I have stepped out and taken the risk thinking, why am I even doing this? This makes no sense. It's because I was listening to my own intuition, and it was so strong that I couldn't back off from it. And Dawn said the same thing. I didn't use it. Anita said, my intuition is sometimes my fear. Yep, exactly. It's over rational fear, irrational fear, whatever you want to call it. it over your intuition. But I'm going to say, I'm not a psychologist, so please don't get me wrong there. There's a little disclaimer there. But if you're saying that your intuition is fear, I would challenge you to say your fear is overcoming your intuition. And that happens a lot to us as well. At least it has to me in the past. I mentioned that I'm going to be moving at the end of the year, and I went through a period, my intuition told me I needed to do this, but I went through a period of fear because it's scary. I'm self-employed, I'm by myself, I'm moving 2.5 hours away. I don't know anybody except my niece in that area, those kinds of things. But somewhere in my gut, my intuition was saying, just make the move. And so I did. And now already the place I'm moving to seems like home. There's not even a house there yet, but it already seems like home. And I know my intuition was right. But guess what, folks? I want you to hear this clearly. There's still some fear because we don't know what's going to happen in our world. I don't know what's going to happen with my income. That is, at the whim of the government, essentially, because I'm grant funded through my clients. Most of my clients are grant funded. So no house, yeah, I'm building. It's the unknown. Yeah. The building part doesn't scare me as much as the new area. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. And I'm very comfortable here. Uh-oh. There's a challenge, isn't there? We'll talk about that in a moment. So sometimes listening to others in our realm, in our world, in our orbit, but also making sure, nope, I'm not leaving, Karen. I'm staying right here in Florida where I can be with you for as long as people will have me. Yes, it said keep the faith. I do. I absolutely do. So another thing is lead by example. Now, some of you are thinking, but I'm not a supervisor, I'm not a manager, I'm not a director. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about leading your life by example. That people around you look at you and think, wow, that was brave, or wow, how did he or she make that decision to move forward like that, or whatever it might be. And guess what? I have crashed and burned a few times when I've taken that risk and tried to really make a good choice. And something happened in that environment that caused it to just almost explode. And that's in my past, and I can't change that. Guess what, though? If I dwell on what's in my past, I can get so discouraged that I don't move ever again. Right? Que sera, sera. Exactly. Whatever will be. But we get comfortable in that whatever will be, and we sit back and cross our arms and wait for life to happen to us. Please, no one in this room today, just sit back and let life happen to you. It's too short. So lead by example. Let people see that you may make a mistake. It may not turn out quite the way you thought, but you're strong. That's why you're here today, because you want to consider the fact that you're going to make good life choices and you want to move forward in your life. Thank you so much for those nice comments about not leaving you. I don't ever want to do that. And then there's lighten up. This is a big one, and to me, it's gotten more important in the last few years with social media being so prominent and the news being, so overwhelmingly negative and anxiety ridden. And they do that to get our eyeballs. That's proven. Psychologists have studied it over and over again. They do those things because human beings are drawn to negativity. It's how we were made. Because in the past, I needed to be negative and be aware of lions and tigers and bears, oh my. But that part of my brain is still there. So when I say lighten up, one of the things I'm talking about is a friend of mine told me this after she'd read a book, be difficult to offend. Now, I happen to be a highly sensitive person. I'm very sensitive, partly because of low self-esteem issues that I had when I was a kid. And I understand from what I've read that those are still in my core, even though I work on those. And I can get offended pretty easy. I bet I could win that particular prize, but it doesn't really serve me well, does it? So there are times when people say something. Now, if they meant it to be offensive, then what I need to do is step back and decide whether I want them in my life anymore. But if I react so quickly without thinking whether or not it was intentional, then that's on me. If I get hurt, if I get offended, if I get defensive, that's on me. So I just want to encourage you, be difficult to offend. That may be the one piece that some of you take from today's webinar. And I always tell people, you're not going to take everything with you. I have a lot packed into today. But if you can take one piece, then I feel like your hour investment is worth it. And that's how I've learned and tried to grow over the years, is just taking little bits and pieces. Not everything I read or watch applies to me when I'm trying to grow, but the things that do, I take hold of and I try to actually use them in my life. So please be difficult to offend. It will make your life easier. Graham Brown, who is a novelist, he's a pilot, he's a lawyer, he had a healthcare firm for a while. He said, life is about choices. No kidding, we just talked about that. Thank you, Karen. Some we regret. Let's just acknowledge it. I'm not going to deny it. Some we're proud of, and that's okay too. Here's a big one. Some will haunt us forever. It could be, the one that popped into my head was an investment my husband and I made many years ago, and we didn't get scammed out of our money, but the people took advantage of us and we had no recourse, and it was for us a huge chunk of money. That still haunts me a little bit. It really haunted my husband, and every time he would start to dwell there, I would have to pull him around and say, that doesn't serve us well. It's over, it's done, we can't recover it. Let it go. So some we regret, some we're proud of, some will haunt us forever. The message is we are what we chose to be, whether it was right, wrong, or somewhere in between. So I think that's pretty good advice. And I would even add to that, and we will be what we choose to be. So let's add that extra sentence there. We will be what we choose to be. Now, I'm very realistic. Other people influence my choices. Absolutely, like I mentioned earlier. And I know that's going to continue for the rest of my life. I'm moving to where I'm moving because my niece bought a house there. Now, if I go over there and I hate it, that's not her fault. I still made that choice, didn't I? Her choice influenced my choice, but I still made the choice because I want to be closer to her. So I'm okay with that. And if I get over there and I hate it, guess what? I can sell a house. I may not want to at this stage of life, but we will be what we choose to be also goes along with that. So let's look at the I, and we are on page 1 of your handouts if you're working through your handouts with me. Yvonne said, my husband always says we make choices based on what we knew at the time. Yeah, we did our best, didn't we? And that is absolutely 100% true until we use it as an excuse, right, Yvonne? Sometimes we use it as an excuse instead of pondering deeply enough to know whether this is the right choice. We take things at face value, or it's the easy way because it's what we know. And so we don't want to go over that fine line of using things as an excuse. Or we don't take responsibility. Exactly, Doris. And I'm sure I step on people's toes pretty much once a week when I do webinars and things, because I tell people I may step on your toes and I will try to not to make them bleed, but if I do, it's because I am concerned about you living your best life. You being, and when I talk about living your best life, I'm not talking about money or fame or power or any of that. I'm talking about you being your best self. That's what I want for everybody in the room today. So I am big on, as you can tell by the title of this program, personal responsibility and accountability. And that's all on us, isn't it? What are your choices of inputs when you think of the I? Oh, ouch, I'm going to step on toes. I already mentioned news, social media. How much of that do you allow to seep inside your brain, and your brain starts thinking, oh, this is what she wants to pay attention to. I will gather more of that for her. And that's true. There's a part of your brain called the reticular activating system at the base of your brain. It filters the things that are coming into your brain, whether it's what you see, whether you hear, what you smell, what you touch, what you taste, whatever it is. The reticular activating system feels like its job is, because you have so many things coming at you, it decides it will help you filter those and pick the ones that you seem to be focused on. So guess what? If you are allowing a bunch of negative stuff into your brain, your reticular activating system says, well, I'm going to help her by filtering out other stuff so that she can focus. It's sort of like when it's when you buy a red car and it's a certain shade of red and you don't remember ever seeing that shade of red again before, but now you see it every day in your neighborhood, in your city, whatever. It's that same kind of a process where your brain starts to pay attention to what you told it was most important. So here I am stepping on toes, and I will really step hard on this one because I know it's happened to me before. It's it's been discouraging, it's caused anxiety, it causes me to lose sleep sometimes when I allow too many inputs. Maybe it's Facebook. I'm not on Facebook more than once or twice a year, so that doesn't really bother me. But the news pops up everywhere. I can be researching something and a headline will pop up that can catch my attention, and all of a sudden I'm down that negative rabbit hole. So what are your choices of inputs? If you're keeping notes on your handouts, I want you to write something in that section toward the bottom of page 1 that you could actually consider lessening a little bit or maybe increasing. I subscribe to an email newsletter called Inspire More, and it's all about the good stuff. That's what it's there for. Now, I'm in tears sometimes because they're happy tears, they're touching tears, they're poignant stories. But what are your choices of inputs? That's the I that we're talking about here. What can you do or say instead? Now, these aren't necessarily connected, but what I'm thinking about is I read something the other day. One thing I read that stuck in my mind is you don't always have to join every argument you're invited to. We do that, Al, no. We think that's common practice, that we're just going to jump in and argue our point. And that's one of the reasons I think we just have a lot of friction around us right now. But the other thing was you can't always make things better, but you can always make them worse. And that's kind of what this refers to. And I just read that last week and I thought, oh boy, that's a good one. I can't always make things better for people because something has happened or a situation is a certain way. But if I don't watch what I say, I can always make it worse, can't I? So what can you do or say instead? Exactly, Ernestine, you need to choose your battles. What's important to you in life? Decide what's really important. Thank you, Ernestine, for that little plug there before we even got started. But that's part of it, isn't it? Decide what's really important to you. For me, this is going to sound so simplistic, but peace in my mind and in my life is very important to me. I'm struggling a little bit right now with this move because I need to declutter. I need to make sure finances are in order and all those kinds of things. And it's sort of, rippling the waves a bit with my peace. But that's what's important to me. And I know that I can get back to that when I do make the move. What's really important to you? It might just be family relationships. My work is hugely important to me, and people don't understand it. Some people have said to me, are you thinking about retiring? No. I don't ever want to retire. I love what I do. It's not been work for 20 years. So why would I want to get away from that? So you need to decide what's really important. Family dynamics absolutely can be tough, Susan. You are totally right. And I tell people when the family dynamic is not what you would hope for, mine never was growing up. I grew up in a very dysfunctional alcoholic family, and so the dynamic was not good. And I could rest on that and use that as an excuse for a lot of bad choices or whatever. But what I tell people now moving forward is I don't want to ever get rid of my family. I don't have much left. But if the dynamic isn't what I would hope for, I can limit my exposure some, can't I? And I can pace when I'm going to be interacting with that member of the family sometimes, not always. Let's say you live with the family dynamic that isn't what you would hope for. Maybe you take an extra 5 minutes in the parking lot at the library before you head home to get your own head straight before you walk in the door. So you have to find ways to account for that, don't you? Because you're not going to change it. That's one thing we need to know is we're not going to change some of these things. So how are we going to overcome them in our own life choices? This lady, Dr. Kathleen Hall, is the founder of the Stress Institute. I don't know about you, but I can always use that. Oh, okay, Karen. So the I being the inputs and what we're going to do and say instead and what's important to us, she says, in every single thing you do, you are choosing a direction. Your life is a product of choices. And I've indicated that. I haven't said it in those exact words. And one of the reasons I'm putting some of these quotes in here is for you to see that there are people more professional than I am in areas that focus, like she does, strictly on the stress part of our lives, that really try to encourage people to think through this particular topic. Yeah, you do have to separate family and work and self, and that is not easy. It sounds like it should be so simple. And here's another thought process. And this just popped into my head because it really doesn't have to do with life choices, except it does from the standpoint of I just came across something a while back that I use in my work-life balance programs. And it's the idea of instead of thinking everything has to be equal in our lives, we need to understand the idea of ebb and flow. I bet for most of you, there's a busier time at your library where you just don't have the energy that you have at other times. And there are times in your family where your energy is going mostly to your family. Don't feel guilty about that. That's ebb and flow. And sometimes it goes one way and sometimes it goes another. So we can be aware of that and make choices appropriate to that, can't we? So we're to the F in this word now. Where is your focus? It's hard to find good help. Whoever did these slides, that would be me, filled in that last blank ahead of time. Where is your focus? Are you focusing on the negative? Are you focusing on the difficult things in your life? I don't know. I'm just asking the question, but it's an important question for us to ask ourselves. Where is your focus? What can you do to flourish? Find the why in your work again. Find what drew you to the library. Focus on that. You can't, whatever it is, you can't do it 100% of the time. What I love is being here with you today. But guess what? In preparation for that, I'm doing handouts, I'm doing research, I'm doing PowerPoint slides, I'm scheduling programs, I'm writing descriptions. All of that's a piece of what I do. But what makes me flourish is when I get to do that with you. So focus on that at your library. When I'm struggling with doing the handouts because I think, oh, I just don't want to type more handouts today, I remind myself I get to do those so that I can be here with you today. I don't say, and I just read an article on this. This is so funny because I've been saying this for years and I probably heard it somewhere else. Whenever I hear myself say I have to do something, I will out loud correct myself to say I get to. For instance, I have to exercise. I tell my cats that in the morning. I'll get up and I'll get things rounded around for them. And then I'll say, now I have to exercise. And then I will say out loud, no, I get to exercise. Where's my focus? My focus is on that privilege we talked about earlier, the privilege of the choice to exercise, because some people don't have the health to do that. How can you be more flexible in your own life? We've gotten so rigid in how we interact with people and what we believe things should be and how we think they should believe and all those kinds of things. So how can you flourish in your circumstances and be more flexible about life itself? I'm going to do one more quote and then I'm going to ask you to make any comments that you might have. This quote is from Judith Knowlton. I discovered I always have choices, and sometimes it's only a choice of attitude. Ha ha ha. You knew that was coming, didn't you? She's an author, by the way. But sometimes that's all you've got left, right, Karen, when it's family? Sometimes it's just a choice of attitude. Susan said, I read somewhere, thought, great, your future self will appreciate what you do now. Talking more about tasks works wonders for a lot of stuff. Yes, exactly. Your future self will appreciate what you do now. If you're procrastinating something, right, Susan? If you're procrastinating something, your future self is just going to be irritated because it's not done. If you go ahead and eat the frog, as I say, and you can look that up later, but if you eat the frog, your future self will thank you for that. Even though you may not have enjoyed actually getting started to do whatever that awful thing was that you needed to get done. Taking time to do stuff thoroughly, right, and doing it on time and making sure that you're being your best self, right? Forgive myself, absolutely, Deborah. If we were just having a workshop face to face and I said, take out a piece of paper and list all the things you need to forgive yourself for, we'd be there all day. Because we all can just beat ourselves up mercilessly. But everybody I have ever met that is living and breathing has made bad choices. And guess what? You learned from those bad choices, or at least I have, and it made me stronger. It made me the person I am right now. I'm not perfect and I'm not where I'd like to be, but I can look back and see some of the bad choices that I made that caused me angst, caused me some difficulty, then made me realize what I needed to do differently. Happy when your task is done. Absolutely. Susan said could really apply with eating healthy and exercising. All of the above. I don't always make good. I love salads. My body craves salads. I'm very fortunate that way, but it tells me also that it craves cheese and garlic croutons. And sometimes those are a little heavier than they need to be on the salad, and I end up not having a healthy salad or whatever. It can be applied to 100 things in your life, can it? Exactly, Dawn. The bad choices you make you who you are today, just like the good choices, right? But again, we can't use that as an excuse to continue to make bad choices. And I've had people do that with me before, where they'll say, well, this is just the way I am. Well, no, that's the way you choose to be. Sorry, but it is something we can overcome. Now, there are people with health issues and things like that that they cannot overcome, maybe emotional health issues, and they need whatever help they can get from society and the medical profession and so forth. That's a totally different topic. We're not talking about that today. Yes, exactly, Dawn. We need to learn from those choices. So let's move on to the E. How are you spending your energy? Focusing on all the bad stuff? Being negative about your work, about your family, about your own choices? How are you spending your energy? Some of you already know this because I've mentioned it before in a different webinar, but I actually disengaged from interacting with a friend that had been a friend for decades because at the end of the year, he was being so snarky and so negative, and we ended a conversation really abruptly. He sent me an email to say he was sorry he had hung up so quickly, but then he went right back in the email to being snarky. And I slept on it overnight. Well, actually, I didn't sleep because we've been friends for so long. And I thought, I can either come back at him because this angers me, or I can just tell him I need to disengage. So the next day I typed him an email and I said, I thought about coming back at you with a lot of comments, but I just don't have the emotional energy and I need to disengage. And I didn't hear from him until April. That was the end of December. I got a birthday card with a little very brief note, hope you have a good year. And I emailed him thanking him for the birthday card. I totally left out any of the negative stuff. And I said, I hope you and Christine are doing well. And I just had a general comment, hope the boys are doing well, which was his golden retrievers. He emailed me a couple pictures. That's good. That's all the energy I can put into that. Avoid living with regret if you can. And it's there, isn't it, Raquel? It's there sometimes, but you don't want to dwell there. I think that's what you're pointing out, and I totally agree with that. Exactly, Pat. I didn't even see your comment. Don't dwell on things. You can't change the past, but you can do things differently. Exactly. And Karen says, it's hard, but you can't control people, only yourself. Be zen, peaceful, focus on you. Yep. Deborah said, I did something similar. Life is too short to put up with other people dumping on me, even if I've known the person for 50 years. Mine was 40. So I'm right there with you, Deborah. I totally get it. And Dan said, it's okay to cut people out of your life who serve no purpose. Yes. It's still difficult though, isn't it? Because we had a lot of good conversations over the years. And I'm okay with staying in touch at the holidays and on birthdays. I would like to have that just touch point, but I'm not going to be drawn back into the negativity again. So I totally agree with all of you. So where are you spending your energy? Are you making excuses? I've already mentioned that a couple times. This is just who I am. Well, this is what happened to me. Well, yeah, you and everybody else, right? So somebody said something to me the other day about somebody taking something that was meant as a compliment, but they took it, which I think we're encouraging now on social media, they took it as being aggressive or whatever. And I said, I was bullied when I was a kid, and I see that that's what it would be called now. But back then, I just thought it was mean people teasing me, and I had to get over it. I had red hair, and I had a weird last name, and my dad was an alcoholic, and I had lots of reasons to be bullied. But I don't want to use that as an excuse. I kind of, looking back, used it as a reason not to be that person and to grow through that. Not there yet, but still working on it. Dan said, as I get older, I tend to have no tolerance for toxic people. That's a good way to put it, Dan. No tolerance for toxic people. I don't have a T in life choices, but I'm going to figure out a way to add that the next time I talk about this. It doesn't serve us well, does it? That's one of my life mottos. Is this serving me well? And Deborah said, I sometimes have second thoughts about the severance, but me too, Deborah. I'm glad you brought that up. I'm able to remember the pain and refuse to accept that from a friend. There's no point, is there? Except for some weird, twisted reason it makes them feel better. And I just don't need to go there. What does enough look like to you? Totally unrelated to anything we've talked about so far, but sometimes people get so wrapped up in more friends, even more finances, eating healthy, exercising, all of those things. What does enough look like to you in any of those areas? Attention, fame, power, status, whatever it might be. What does enough look like to you? I remember when I was talking to a friend of mine about a year and a half ago now, it was still when I was traveling, however long ago that was. And I had done a workshop, and then I went to dinner with these friends of mine that I hadn't seen for decades, literally. And we were talking about me possibly moving. And I said, yeah, I'd kind of like to build. And he said, oh, what would you build, a 2,500 square foot house? And I said, no, it's me and the cats. We don't, and at that time, my dog has since passed away, but I said, I don't need that much space. What I'm building, because I work out of my home, I would like it to be a smidge bigger, but that's what I could afford and felt comfortable with, and it's enough. Yep, it's actually quite good. Exactly, Deborah. It makes me smile when I think about it because I'm so grateful for everything I do have. Zig Ziglar was a big motivational speaker for many, many, many years before he passed away. And he said, getting knocked down in life is a given. There you go, folks. Getting up and moving forward is a choice. And the choice is ours. And it's scary sometimes that choice is ours because it's so much more comfortable to wallow, isn't it? Yvonne said contentment. Exactly. That's what we're talking about. The C in life choices. Are you happy with your character? I got to think most of the people in this room are fairly happy with that, or you wouldn't have even bothered to sign up for this webinar today. But there are times my character, I was feeling myself drawn into the negativity of that relationship I told you about. I quit a job once because I felt like my character was changing. And I believed I was becoming a person I didn't want to be. And I wasn't happy with my character anymore. And when they asked me to come back, and my husband said, could you go back? He half jokingly said, could you go back for a couple of years? Because it was a huge pay increase and this and that. And I said, only if I sell my soul, because my character would have been different. And I have choices about that, don't I? Have you found your calling? And it doesn't necessarily mean your job. Maybe your calling is art. Maybe your calling is gardening. And yes, it's good if your calling has something to do with your work. That is absolutely, to me, the best scenario in the world. My former life involved a corporate job. I liked my work, but it certainly wasn't a calling like what I feel like I'm doing now. But for some people, it might be. I have a friend whose calling is photography. That just brings him great joy. It brings other people great joy. He doesn't sell them. He could. It's that good. But have you found your calling? Robin said, I thought I did once upon a time. And maybe it's time to revisit that, right, Robin? And by the way, you all have my email address at the bottom of the first page of your handouts, and that will be changing by the end of the year, but I'll be putting it on handouts when I know for sure that's happening. But if you need to delve a little deeper or just have something that you need somebody to kind of push back maybe on a little bit or nudge or whatever, drop me an email. I'm always happy to do that. Deborah said the voices, there are so many things calling me. That's good. That's good. So you have a lot of areas you can go to. What do your conversations sound like? Not just your conversations with other people, but I don't know about you, but I have conversations inside my own head. And sometimes those voices that Deborah is talking about aren't very nice and can really drag me down. So what do your conversations sound like? It's just another way of looking at your life choices, isn't it? Remember I said, don't be so easy to offend. Don't go to every argument you're invited to. You have those choices, but I will tell you it is extremely difficult as human beings for us to disengage from that because we want to defend ourselves. That's how we evolved with fight and flight and freeze. We're either going to fight with defensiveness with our mouth, or we're going to flee withdrawing or pouting or whatever, we're going to freeze and just become nobody, not saying anything. So what do your conversations sound like? But particularly pay attention to those conversations inside your own head. I'm not even going to try to pronounce his name because he's a Greek philosopher. The content of your character is your choice. Day by day, what you choose, what you think, and what you do is who you become. And we've seen that rephrased 20 different ways in the last many years as people have talked more and more about being your best self and self-development and all those kinds of things. We've seen this rephrased. It's about attitude and all that. We've heard all of that. But I like the way this is phrased. Day by day, what you choose. Robin said, don't take everything personal. Not everybody's not, don't, okay, it rolled on me, Robin, sorry. Not everybody's trying to attack you. And even if they are, Robin, which I agree, most people are not actually, that's on them. I can't worry about it. I worked with somebody for a while that would be so snarky, and I really felt like I didn't have a lot of choice except in my response. And that's what I kept focusing my energy on, is to make sure I didn't get drawn into the drama of that, because I figured that was that person's problem. My sister, God rest her soul, because she died 3 years ago, but she was having a lot of problem with somebody at work. And one day she said, I figured it out. I wouldn't want to live inside their head. And that made a lot of sense to me. The choices you make in your character makes up who you are exactly. The last one for C. Let's see if it'll let me go back to that. Nope, it does that every time. Let's see. Conversations is what that was. Dawn, conversations. Thanks, Pat. Okay, the H. Are you being honest? And I'm not talking about necessarily with other people. I would hope so. We usually get caught if we're not, but a lot of times we're not honest with ourselves, and we don't really recognize that we get caught. Because if we're not being honest with ourselves, usually when we don't get caught, it's when our choices have led us into something that's not going to be productive for us. It's not going to be moving us forward. So, are you being honest with yourself? Are you taking care of your own health? Whatever that looks like to you. Everybody's at a different stage of life. Everybody has different health issues that they have to deal with, but are you taking care of your own health? I'm pretty sure those Ghirardelli brownies I ate a few weeks ago were not the best thing in the world for me, so I don't eat them every day. I sure like them, and I could eat them every day, but I try not to do that. Deborah said, my younger self wanted happily ever after so much that I was not always honest with myself. Absolutely, that happens a lot, doesn't it? What are you doing to embrace happiness? Whatever that looks like to you. And as the little quote there says from Stephen Covey, happiness, like unhappiness, is a proactive choice. I would say another one to think about is happiness is not 24/7. If you're chasing it 24/7, all that leads to is unhappiness, as weird as that sounds. What are you doing to encourage joy? Might be another piece of that, because we know it won't happen by osmosis sometimes. Sometimes it does. It just kind of lands on us and we feel that sense of peace and contentment and happiness and joy. But sometimes we have to embrace it, don't we? We have to recognize the beautiful flower outside the window, or the bird on the bird feeder, or the cat purring, or a good conversation with a friend or a family member, whatever it is. Absolutely, Robin, only you can make yourself happy. So note to yourself, your life is a result of choices you make. You've heard it said a number of ways. If you don't like your life, it's time to start making better choices. Simple as that. So the O, are you willing to be open? Well, you all have been today, and I appreciate that, because the more we join in the chat to share our own questions, struggles, puzzles, confusion, excitement, whatever it might be, the more we encourage other people in the room to go that way as well. You all know I'm open, probably more so than I need to be. I hope I never offend by sharing my personal stories, but it's who I am, and I can't get beyond that. That's just who I am and how I've experienced life, and I am willing to be open. Sometimes to the point where I think, oh, those people are going to think less of me because I shared something very negative. But it happens. And I'd rather share it with you so that you can learn from it too. Do you truly consider your options about whatever is happening in your life? You have options in how you use your finances. You have options in how you take care of yourself. You have options in who you interact with and how you do that. You have options in your work. Somebody said, well, I don't have any choices. I have to do this job. Well, there are other jobs available. And it still is an option, isn't it? I don't want anybody to leave their job. But to blame that so that you stand still is not really fair either. How can you build your optimism? Somebody share with us a way that you build your optimism. What's something you do for yourself to stay optimistic? Yvonne, I love that. 3 things I'm grateful for every day. I have a gratitude journal. Some of you have heard me mention it. I'm on number 3,400, and I think it was 81 this morning. I don't always write 3, but I always write at least 1, and it does 2 things. It reminds me of how much I have to be grateful for, but it also forces me to look for things to be grateful for every single day. It's the best thing I've ever done for myself. And I didn't start it until after my husband died. I started it 4 years ago next month, and I have almost 4,000 things in there. Very few repetitious things, only them by accident. Drink coffee. I'm with you, Susan. Every morning. That's just part of my process. And I can drink decaf. That's no problem for me, but it's part of that ritual that brings me peace. Yep. Pat says, think about the future and what it might hold. And the choices we can make to lead us toward that, right? And Yasmin said gratitude as well. Short-term achievable goals. Feels pretty good, doesn't it, Cindy? When we can check something off, we made it, we stretched ourselves a little bit, but we didn't make something so unrealistic we couldn't get there. That's important too. Deborah said to reflect on how no matter what, no matter how much I've worried in the past, things always have a way of working out one way or another. And whatever way we end up, if we choose to make the best of it, then we can move forward, can't we? Dan said repeating positive affirmations. Dan, that's the reason I included all these quotes today, which seem a little overdone because I use a few usually, but today I'm using a lot because I want to confirm with you that this works. This is real stuff. Courtney said, go on Pinterest and look at positive quotes. Yeah, there are millions of them, or just Brainy Quote. That's another site, Brainy Quotes. I can't remember which one. Yasmin said, know what you have going for you today. A lot, don't we? We have the ability to be here today in this webinar. And Robin said, try something different. Take a step outside your comfort zone. I do too, Dan. It can get me in trouble. Pinterest can, but I love it. Pat said, there's always someone else out there who's so much worse off than you. I totally agree with that, Pat. I'm going to rephrase that, though. A friend of mine said she used to tell her kids, well, it could be a lot worse. And we do need to recognize that, don't we? But let's rephrase it in a positive way. And instead of saying it could be a lot worse, which to me kind of indicates we've got it pretty bad, but it could be worse, I just like to say, look how blessed I am. Look how much I have to be thankful for. And make sure I'm focusing on the positive part of that. And Ruben said, listening to positive YouTube videos. Yeah, those are great, aren't they, Ruben? Good to see you today. Having a good night's sleep and waking up feeling refreshed. That's a privilege right there, isn't it? Because a lot of people struggle with that. And again, there's some choices we can make within that can help us in that area. So the O notes to myself, the way I see it, if you want the rainbow, you got to put up with the rain. And y'all know who Dolly Parton is. And isn't that true? We never get to see a rainbow unless it's been raining. The I. Are you willing to be intentional about this? When you leave today, are you willing to put your mind to the fact that there was something today that you need to maybe stop doing, start doing, or continue doing, but you need to be intentional about it? Nothing here is rocket science. I haven't said anything you haven't heard before. I might have a little more enthusiasm about it because I believe it so strongly, but you need to be intentional when you leave, don't you? About whatever those choices happen to be. How can you impact others? Be thinking about when you leave today, how can you impact somebody else's day or somebody else's life, whatever that might be? Not that you have to just, that's your whole focus every single day, but it feels pretty good to impact other people in a positive way, doesn't it? How will you use your influence? And I'm not talking about social media influence. I'm talking about people watching you and listening to you. You're influencing people about their own choices, their own decisions, their own attitudes sometimes. Not that they don't have choices in those areas, but like I said, we all influence each other, don't we? So how are you going to use that influence? When given the choice between being right or kind, choose kind. And Wonder was the movie a story about a boy with facial differences? So that's one of the ways we can influence other people. We can have impact. We can be intentional. But I'm going to add here, be kind to yourself too. I can be right about the fact that I've made mistakes and that I made poor choices. And if that's where I dwell, I'm going to be negative. Or I can be kind to myself and say, you know what? I'm human. I can do better tomorrow. Or maybe even today. The C, second C, will you stay in your comfort zone? There are times that's very appropriate. There are other times where you need to stretch a little bit. It's up to you whether you choose to stay there and then blame the world because life is just ho-hum. Life is just blah. But let me remind you, as I've already said and somebody else put in the chat box, life is too short to not do something that's going to move you out of your comfort zone, make you excited, make you nervous maybe a little bit antsy because you're doing something different. Do you recognize the consequences of your choices? That's something we don't always think about, and we need to. Step back and say, okay, here's what I could do, and here's what I could do. I like this one. Well, that's wonderful. Have you thought about what the consequences will be? One of the reasons I think I didn't make my move to move quicker, and I wish I would because the price went up the day before I signed the contract. But it's also gone up 3 times since then, so I feel better about that. But one of the reasons was that when I would think about the consequences of moving, part of that was just the just overwhelming idea of changing emails and addresses and all of that kind of stuff and moving 2 cats 2.5 hours away and all of that. But I was staying in my comfort zone. Do you see that? I was staying in my comfort zone because I've been here for 16 years and it's comfortable. I told somebody, I said, I can move and there's going to be a lot of upheaval to that, or I can just exist where I'm at. Because when I move, there's going to be a lot of excitement, a lot of energy, a lot of forward moving. And here it's very comfortable, but I'm just existing. Thank you, Dan, for asking that question, and Don got to. Thank you. Will you admit you do have a choice in a lot of those things, in moving out of your comfort zone and all of those things? Will you admit that? The 3 C's of life: choices, chances, and changes. Don't you love that? Choices, chances, and changes. You must make a choice to take a chance or your life will never change. I didn't even realize that was the next one coming up, but that's exactly what I was describing when I was talking about moving. I had to make a choice to take the chance or my life will never change. Not that it's a bad life. I've been perfectly content here, but almost to the point of being complacent, and that's not the way I want to live. Are your emotions getting in the way? The last one on that C was choice. Will you admit you have a choice, Shirley? On the E, you're welcome. The second E, are your emotions getting in the way? It's one of those things about recognizing that and being intentional about paying attention to your emotions, because they can ambush us. And boy, has our world, it seemed like, gotten ambushed by emotions over the last decade or 15 years or 12 years or 3 minutes or whatever it is. Our emotions get in the way, don't they? That kind of goes back to be difficult to offend and all that kind of stuff. Don't let your emotions ambush you. They will from time to time, but you can't live there. Acknowledge them, move through them, decide what you're going to do with them. How long are you going to wallow in them? That's what I tell people, which sounds really harsh, but it's true, isn't it? Now, the emotion of excitement and enthusiasm and all of that, you can live there as long as you want, as long as you're being realistic about whatever it is you're excited about. But if it's anything negative or depressing or anxiety ridden, how long are you going to dwell there? What's your choice to get yourself out of that particular emotion? Where will you find the energy? Whoops, it skipped ahead on me. Where will you find the energy to make any changes you decide to make today? Because it takes energy. Otherwise, you would have made them a long time ago. So where are you going to find that energy? What are you going to remove from your life? What are you going to refocus on to find the energy that you need? And what will life look like when you engage differently? Here's the thing. If you engage differently and it's a total flop, take a different direction. That's what choice is all about. It's not a one and done in most of the choices we make. Some of them are pretty severe and pretty, set in stone, but very few. So when you engage differently, what will it look like? Absolutely, Yvonne. If you make a choice that turns out wrong, just yell plot twist. Oh, I like that. Plot twist. Choose another. Go in a different direction. And every direction we take teaches us something. How cool is that? So the note for the E, people lose their enthusiasm and disengage for a variety of reasons: boredom, disinterest, rejection, apathy, overwhelm, exhaustion. Once a person begins to disengage, the tendency can bleed over into other areas of their life and disconnect them from what would actually bring them joy. This lady is a consultant. It's just one of the things that she engages in her own life to help other people. But when we disconnect like that from other things, that would have actually brought us joy. So, yeah, I get bored. Yeah, I get disinterested. Yeah, I'm rejected. All those things. But I need to make the choice not to allow that to bleed over. Wasted energy. Exactly. So, the last S, the only S in choices, are you willing to stir yourself up? I have tried to stir you up today. I read something, it's been a few months ago now, and it said, information and inspiration is not transformation. So I've tried to inspire you. I've tried to give you information today, but that's not going to create transformation in your life. That requires personal application, personal responsibility, personal accountability. Are you willing to stir yourself up? Will you admit that this is simple? Because it is. I didn't say it was easy in some cases, but it's relatively simple. Again, none of it's rocket science. It doesn't cost you anything for most of these things. How can you use your strength? Because you're all strong, or you wouldn't even be here today. Are you willing to stir yourself up when you leave here today? Will you admit that it's simple? At least something that you've thought of today can be simple for you, but it will take that focus and that intentionality that we talked about earlier. And how can you use your strength to achieve that? Jillian Michael says you can look for external sources of motivation, and that can catalyze a change, but it won't sustain one. That's me. I want to be your external source of motivation, but I can't create your internal motivation, which is the only thing that will sustain you. It has to be from an internal desire, doesn't it? When I talk about supervising, I tell people you can't motivate other people. I can't do that, but I can create a motivating environment. And that's what I've tried to do for you today. Dan, thank you so much. I appreciate that comment. The question becomes, though, for all of you in here today, what will your choice be? What are you going to do differently to make sure your life choices are leading you to the life you want? Because you don't get another one, folks. At least not in my opinion. Thank you for attending. Remember, if it's to be, it's up to me. The 3 L's. Let's see if I can find them. The very first 3 L's. Okay, listen, lead, and lighten up. And remember, if you need to Thank you for those comments, Don and everybody. I appreciate that. And yes, thank you to Taylor and Deb. I appreciate it. And if you need me, drop me an email. Thanks everybody for being here today. Go and make great life choices.
Thank you, Linda, for an informative webinar this afternoon. Attendees, if you enjoyed this webinar, we ask that you join us on July 30th for Linda Bruno's next webinar, How to Handle That Dreaded Discipline Problem. As always, we encourage you to keep an eye on the Swiftland CE calendar, the Swiftland Facebook page, or your message from the listserv. Thank you everyone for attending, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you, Deb. Thank you, Linda.